Good afternoon or good evening, rather. Haiti Oresa with Florida You Judge, and I am here. I'm joined by Justin Garcia from Creative Loafing and my great colleague, John McGuire. We're waiting for the president of the NAACP in Hillsborough County, Yvette Lewis. So I'm going to wait a couple of minutes to hopefully get some viewers notified so that they could join tonight's broadcast. It's live. We're going to be have the ability to take live call-ins, and we have Yvette Lewis just joined us. And good evening, Miss Lewis. How are you this evening?
I am fine. How are you this
I'm doing
evening?
good. I'm blessed. God is good. So we have two viewers. I don't know. I'm gonna just go ahead and skip the music play. Just to kind of get people notified. There's two people that have already tuned in. Again, my name is Haiti Oropesa. Today's going to be a real good broadcast. Um, we are going to, the topic of tonight's broadcast is an article written by Justin Garcia. He's a reporter with Creative Loafing. And a couple of weeks ago, I don't know the exact date of the publication, Justin. Maybe you can enlighten me. But Justin wrote, Tampa Police add controversial mute function to body worn cameras. That is his article. He did a great job bringing this to our attention. And I just wanted to bring him on so that we could discuss this. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to speak to Mona Judge. I know Mona, Yvette does. I don't know if you do, but yesterday I thought it was hilarious. I told her you'd be on today. She's probably tuning in. And if you are, Mona, good evening. She said that Creative Loafing, they be telling it like it is. And that is the truth. Thank God that we have a publication and outlet like you. So tell us a little bit about what just happened with the policy change with the body cams that police officers in Tampa Police Department wear.
Yeah, so it was last Wednesday, I believe. I went and watched the Citizens Review Board meeting from the night before, and I put it on in the morning while I was doing my, making my coffee and making breakfast and stuff. And as I was listening, one of the person who reports to the Citizens Review Board, Sergeant Messmer at TPD, he said to the review board that a small change was being implemented to TPD's body worn cameras, and then just kind of quickly glossed over what these functions would do. Multiple times he said that the functions would just be used by officers when they're going to the restroom or doing other private things. And the Citizens Review Board, unfortunately, just kind of said, okay, they asked one question about it. Messmer responded, and then they said, okay, that's fine. And they moved on. And it really raised some red flags for me because I remembered the shooting of Stephon Clark over on the West Coast. And shortly after his shooting, it became a matter of nationwide controversy because the police ran up to the cop who shot Stephon Clark. And right when they started talking about the shooting and what had happened, one of the cops said, "Hey, mute," which triggered that body cam to go on mute as the police discussed the details of the shooting. And so then you had people from across the country crying out saying, "Hey, what's going on with this information? We want you to release this body cam information." And it became a whole controversy in that case. And then I started digging deeper, and then you had a case in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where a police officer had used the mute function to essentially put himself on mute before he shouted a bunch of horrible stuff at this poor woman he pulled over, and then wrongfully detained her and injured her. On top of that, the TPD are also adding a silence function, which makes it easier to just basically pause the camera's recording and turn it back on. And so after seeing all that, I was like, this is a story, and it isn't a small change like TPD tried to pass it off as. It is a change that has a significant impact on how police use their body cameras.
Okay, and so I want to now ask the president of the NAACP in Hillsborough County, Yvette Lewis. You mentioned, Justin, that you went to the Citizen Review Board and that they said that they had just made a change. Were you notified of that?
No, I wasn't notified of it, and I'm a bit taken back and disturbed because they didn't ask us about it, but they did come and ask us, would we agree or consent to the body cams? And so we did. And so when they applied for the grants for the body cam, um, the NAACP wrote a letter of reference for that. But
Okay, so basically, you're kept out now. My understanding, and that this is based on Justin Garcia. And again, I'm going to urge the public, if you don't already subscribe, support Creative Loafing. It is a phenomenal. Journalistically, they bring the truth. They don't pull punches. They are speaking truth to power, bringing facts and bringing information that's incorporated in the Bill of Rights. The founding fathers thought that that was very important, and this is an incredible outlet. Your article mentioned the composition of the Citizen Review Board, which is 11 members, 5 appointed by the mayor, a former chief of police, 5 by the city council, and then 1 member of the 11 member body is appointed by the NAACP. So am I getting something wrong? Isn't the whole idea with body worn cameras from the history recent for some decades now, we're constantly seeing in the news black men, black and brown men, primarily black, being seen or being the subject matter of stories of excessive force. The body cam footage here, the one that we're talking about with Tampa, they implemented it initially. The city council said no. I remember Christopher Cano, who's an activist. He tagged me. This was May 31st, 2020. He was calling out, this is Fox 13 News. Tampa leaders vote down police body camera. He began to make noises. He tagged me as one of the persons that he tagged locally. And then thereafter, it came to pass. So the benefit is for persons that we're continually seeing being the targets of excessive force or things that happen where we're all up. George Floyd, that happened in 2020. Okay. They're the reason why body worn cameras are to be used. The NAACP, that's part of their mission, representation of minorities and their rights and their protections, and they only get 1 seat at the table. John, is there a problem with this?
Well, thanks for having me on, Haiti. There's absolutely a problem, and it's not really about black and brown people. It's about anybody who's accused of a crime. When I was in law enforcement in the 1980s, if someone had a camera, it was held over their shoulder and you'd see it from far away. Nobody had cameras. And cameras for police can help convict people. It's the best evidence in the courtroom. You have a video, you have an actual recording of what takes place. And so Pasco County, when they started Live PD, they spent $2 million and bought these cameras. They have retention policies, and they have a specific police officer. His sole job, the public information officer actually, is to redact any information from the videos, and every police department has it. So Justin can't walk into a police department and look at a video until it's been gone over to make sure there's no confidential information, to make sure there's no privileged communications on there, or make sure that there's no video of children or somebody that shouldn't be made public, a public record. And the example, there's 2 examples in Pasco County, one being Bonnie Figueroa was a white female who had a Latino husband and a 2-year-old girl. She had some mental health issues. She had a pistol. The police pulled up. She was at the edge of the woods. They have video of her. She fired 1 round off, pointed at the ground, and she ran into the woods. She ran into the woods because at the other side of the woods was her house, her husband, and her child. And the police officer who was talking to her husband turned off his camera. He says because he was there talking to the husband and the child was there and he didn't want to videotape the child. Then he ran around the back of the house and he shot and killed her. The husband said she did not raise her arm or the firearm at the moment, and his video camera was off. And the difficulty is police officers make mistakes. They shouldn't be empowered to turn the camera on and off. Somebody can review that. Ultimately, that can be reviewed by a judge to see if that information that's on the camera is useful or privileged or should be excluded. There was no reason to mute a camera. There was no reason to turn off a camera. If an officer is going to the bathroom in their policies and procedures, and it's true, they might have to go to McDonald's to use a restroom, go into the restroom, take off their gun belt and hang it up, and then use the restroom, and then get dressed and go back to work, and then they turn it back on. That I could understand. But nothing else in their work should entitle them to turn the camera on and off. And I'll tell you, the second situation I had in Pasco County, Heath LaBarge, someone was pulled over. They found drugs, and the officer turned off the camera, smashed out the tag light, stole cash and drugs, was our position, and then turned the camera back on. Ultimately, he kept doing this, and they let him go, and then he went to work for another police department. But no police officer should have the power to turn off the camera, turn on the camera, or mute it. The only thing it will solve is to hide police corruption. There's no other reason to do it, because Justin can't go get the video until it's been screened and cleared of any information. And if Justin, a reporter, says, oh, wait, there's information missing, then you'd have to go to court and see if that public record should be released to the media or to whoever requests that, whether it's a defense lawyer or others. So I think it's a huge problem. I think they need to have a uniform state policy on the public records, which I think they do, and that police officers on the street should not be allowed to tamper with that public record by turning it off and permanently deleting that information.
All right, well, because right now, the Florida state law under 943.1718, it does give departments the ability to create policy. So Mary O'Connor, the newly appointed chief of the Tampa Police Department, she just went ahead and she said, yes, we're going to make these changes. And the changes, based on Justin Garcia's reporting, his article states that you can turn it off when the officer believes that there's nothing that's going to be have any value of that contains critical information or documentary information. That's one. There's not going to be any loss of critical documentary information. The officer reasonably believes it's necessary to protect tactical or confidential discussions or briefings, is directed by a supervisor to do so, to mute it. And for privacy reasons, going into the bathroom. Look, they're starting to carve away except or a basis to allow an officer to not preserve information that may be valuable to the determination of an action. So they're taking away the very thing. It's like counterproductive to what the goal of having body worn cameras is about. And like you said, the current law does allow departments individually to create their own policy. And just kind of adding to what you said, John, shouldn't it be, like you said, let the recording take place, provide no exceptions, and then just, if it's not, it shouldn't be released under public records, then it's not, like we do now. There's information that when we make public records requests, agencies, departments say, no, there's an exemption. We can't give that to you. Is that what you're referring to, John?
Yes, there's two issues. One is Florida statutes, Public Records Law 119.07 outlines retention policies and who can request the records and what the exemptions would be. And the police departments are responsible for making sure they filter that out. Don't give out people's, like, officers' address, phone numbers, maybe there's a provision for children who are victims of crimes. And so they redact all that already before a reporter like Justin could get that video. It's already redacted. So the police officer doesn't need that authority to do that and shouldn't have it, because then it's gone forever. And if they do like they did in the case of Heath LaBarge and they say, well, I'm going to turn off my camera, I'm going to smash out the tag light to pretend I had probable cause, and then turn my camera back on and go, why is your tag light out? Now, we know what he did because the police officer, my client, knew what happened. But we also know that there was a camera on in the building that he didn't know was on. And we also know that the camera from his car caught the tag light on. And the judge saw all this. And so even though the policy with Pasco County says they can turn it off to make tactical decisions or to have police procedure discussions, all of that would have been eliminated and redacted out by the information officer. And
it was retained, but it was preserved.
It would be preserved, and then a judge could look at that in camera. And you know what? The public to know, how police raid a house so that the criminal defendant could then harm that police officer in the next raid. So there's tactical decision that should stay private, but that record shouldn't be kept.
Exactly. But again, right now, the law allows law enforcement agencies to create policy. That's what just happened. There's nothing unlawful about what Mary O'Connor just did. But is that transparency, Yvette? Is that transparency?
No.
And look, John, you said that it's not a black or white thing, but the majority of cases that we see are black men, John. She's the president of NAACP. She has that organization has one seat in an 11-member board, and that strikes me as problematic. That they only get one seat, and the mayor, who was a former police officer, chief, gets 5 seats.
Yeah. The
very people that we're trying to have accountability over get 5 seats, and city council, who oftentimes some people, the perception is they just go along with whatever the administration does. They get 5 seats, and then the NAACP gets 1. I have a problem with that. Yvette, is there a problem with these things you made mention? You were quoted in Justin's article. You said that it was a good move to bring in the body cams, but now it's like we're going backwards with trust and transparency. Is that true with now this new policy?
That is true, because I'm not quite sure if you realize this, but when Chief Dugan passed, past Chief Brian Dugan was the chief, there were some police officers that got in trouble for turning off their body cams. And what they were doing were harassing the African American community. And someone filed a complaint on it. So one of them was fired, and then some of them was suspended from work. So for a policy that worked then, now for you to reverse that policy back, and you didn't even give us the common courtesy to say, hey, we're going to change this or anything, it's a slap in the face. We are taking steps back.
How is that representation for the NAACP? Because you know what? You just had an open house and there are a bunch of politicians. They're there. Is it a little dog and pony? Oh, yeah, we care. But so when I see this, how is this transparency? Jane Castor recently, when there's this dissension and division with her and the city council, we're going to have more transparency. This doesn't strike me as being transparent. And let's do the contrast. Justin, you reported. Go ahead and speak to what the contrast is between Tampa and St. Pete. St. Pete I think, should be the model for every agency. And let's speak about that.
Well, St. Pete told me that they purposely chose not to use those functions. And they said the main reason was that it can lead to trouble, kind of like John was mentioning, that, having that function so easily available can make it easy to delete public records that are supposed to be maintained under public records law. So, if you have an officer who is new to using the function, mutes something because his commanding officer said to, and then forgets to unmute it, then you just lost critical information. Also, the wording that TPD used to justify using the mute function when you look at all those things combined, it's almost like an officer can mute or silence their camera for any reason that they see fit, which is kind of disturbing. And yeah, when I did talk to Mary O'Connor, the police chief, about the reasoning behind using these functions, she mentioned, the going to the bathroom thing, and that when an officer goes to the bathroom, if they have to turn off their camera, it takes X amount of seconds to turn back on. And she said, so what if that convenience store that they're going to the restroom at, or the McDonald's, whatever, is getting robbed? Then they have to turn on their camera again, and then we lose that information, right? But then I asked her, I said, well, what are the examples you've heard that, like, occurrences like that have actually happened that led you to make this decision? And she said, well, I don't have any of those on hand. So it was kind of the same old argument that police departments make sometimes when doing these things that lack transparency, is they go, same thing with biking while black and crime-free multi-housing that has recently, gone under scrutiny by the public. It's the same old argument, if we don't do this thing and if you question it, then crime's going to happen to you. Crime's going to increase. You're going to get hurt. That kind of fear as a tool kind of tactic. Well, but they don't have any real examples of why they chose to do this.
You know what? In fairness, I invited through Adam Smith, the communications person at with the city of Tampa. I invited either you can come, Adam, Jane Castor, Mary O'Connor, whomever from the city, to come and speak to get some of these questions. I'd like to see an actual demonstration. My understanding is, from my research, is that it's not 50 seconds to reboot after you turn it off. So, and John, you were an officer. I think that's a rarity. How often does an officer go into the bathroom and all of a sudden there's a robbery that's taking place?
Well, first of all, I have a client who was a law enforcement officer that forgot their gun belt in the restroom, in a public restroom. So there's a preference to not use a public restroom. There's a preference to either use the officer's house or the restroom or go back to the station. But sometimes they have to use a public restroom. And, I can see the point of turning it off. When you turn it on, it actually is recording all the time. So it can go backwards 30 seconds before you turn it on. So it'll record everything, but just the opposite of what you're saying. It records backwards. And so, if somebody has to race out and they turn it on, then it wouldn't lose anything. I can't even understand. I suppose if they're attacked while in the toilet, maybe that would be a situation.
But the thing is this, that the whole policy change is, look, we want the standby sleep mode and the mute mode, because if you just turn it off, it'll take 50 seconds to reboot. I question that. I'd like a demonstration. Could Mary O'Connor, somebody in the TPD, I want to actually see what the actual time passage before rebooting. But you also, Justin, asked her in your article that what was the difference between the time difference between turning it off and then just muting it. And she didn't know. Did she know the answer to that?
She didn't have a direct.
Okay. So we have a newly appointed chief that just made a policy, a huge one. That's my opinion. People could differ in their opinions, but
Haiti, can I point out this issue? When you turn the camera on, it goes backwards 30 seconds. It doesn't take 30 seconds forward. It's always running. So when the police officer turns on the camera, it goes backwards 30 seconds. So it's always recording, and when you hit it to record on, it goes backwards. And the reason they design it that way, if they see something to happen and they push the button.
Which recording device are you talking? Are you talking about Axon?
The shoulder one that at least that Pasco has, their shoulder.
Well, no, I want to know. We're talking about Axon. That's the company that they're using. I don't know that it's the similar. I think when you turn it off, it's off.
I was at a trial today in Pasco, and they mentioned that they use a different body cam company.
That's right. So
it might be
talking about a different one, John.
I'm not sure.
I believe that they all run constantly while they have battery power, and when you turn it on, it goes backwards 30 seconds. I couldn't imagine.
That's not my understanding. But listen, I'd be honored if somebody from TPD would come on a live broadcast and explain to us exactly how this is. She didn't have the answer for you when you did your research and gave her the opportunity to answer your questions. She also, when you pointed out the controversies around the country with this mute function. Her exact quote from your article, and people, public, I'd urge you to go online and read Justin's article. It's very well done with a lot of information. That's what I'm reading, or where I'm reading from. There's a portion of the article when Justin when asked about the controversies the changes have caused in other cities, O'Connor said, "I don't really want to speak for policy decisions that other agencies make. I think every agency has to examine the function of cameras and how it could best accommodate them." Now, I don't know about you all, but it seems to me, if she's the chief of a police agency, for her to say, "I don't even care how other people do things," that seems a little sloppy to me.
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things I haven't mentioned yet is that in my article, I include a situation that occurred in Mesa, Arizona, where a police officer pulled over a city council person, and the council person was inebriated, and they were trying to argue their way out of it. And multiple times when talking to his superior, the police officer mutes the camera over and over again. And then they talked to a professor who studies police culture in Arizona. And he brought up the point of, Axon serves a lot of police departments around the country. They're and around the world. They're a big, body camera provider. And he brought up, that issue of transparency. And he said, when you do things like this, it only makes the public question you more. And I remember I was there at Mary O'Connor, at the press conference where Mary O'Connor was announced as a new police chief by Jane Castor. And that whole process was problematic because it wasn't very transparent. So we asked her at the press conference, what are you going to do to address this issue sometimes with transparency between TPD and the public and the media? And she said that was a top priority of hers. And in this situation, she couldn't answer some of the questions that I had about the body cameras and why they were being used. She said she did extensive research, but a lot of the problems around the country point to this being potentially a real big problem for TPD.
All right, listen, we only have like 4 minutes left. John, do you find it problematic? I've never been in law enforcement, but you have prior to becoming an attorney. Do you not, if you were the chief, would you not maybe want to see what other agencies are doing and the success of whatever policy decision they made and why it worked, why it didn't? I mean, yes, no?
Chief Holloway from St. Pete has it right. You want to instill confidence in people regardless. I mean, obviously, when we talk about the NAACP, that 6 times as many men of color are incarcerated as other men, and they have 6 times as much exposure and problems, but it affects everyone. If you're the council person and you're not inebriated, you want that video not muted. You want that audio not muted. You want it to protect yourself. So there's no reason other than to hide police corruption to have a mute button. There's none. And
St. Pete
can be redacted out from the inside the department.
St. Petersburg Police Department, they should be the model. The spokesperson said that they opted out because, first of all, with the sleep mode and the mute mode, it drains the battery. And also, when you have officers already that at any given moment, they can go into a high intensity, nerve-wracking situation to start thinking, do I mute now? Do I unmute? How many times have we heard, I still forget to unmute myself during Zoom meetings? Huh? The public does that all the time. I see it. When I go on Zoom in court, Ms. Oropeza, can you please unmute yourself? Because even though I've become accustomed to being on Zoom, people forget. So they're saying, and I'm quoting from Creative Loafing, Justin Garcia's article, Fernandez said, that's the spokesperson for St. Petersburg Police Department, that adding the mute and sleep function only complicate what officers have to do in the field, and forgetting to record audio or video in a certain situation could lead to a difficult situation for the officers involved. It's not a good policy. I think the ideal, as John has suggested, I agree. And for those of you who understand, and you know this very well, and you may too also, Yvette, doing public records requests, you make a request, there's somebody that is responsible for processing those requests and seeing what if there are any exemptions. And if you don't get a right, because the legislature has says you don't get a right to review that, that's not public record. You don't get it. But if you just go ahead and start with, just like St. Petersburg, everything is recorded. Everything is recorded. If there is something that the public should not have access to, then you're denied. No, you're not going to get access. And then you can litigate. That's the best way. That is transparency. That promotes the purpose of even having body-worn cameras. Tampa Police Department, what they're doing now, they're going backward. It's a dog and pony. For the NAACP president, and listen, folks, for those of you who live in Hillsborough and in Tampa particularly, for the president of the NAACP to have been left out anytime there's a benefit, minorities, blacks in particular, are underrepresented in numbers. But if they're getting screwed, the numbers, even though they represent a little percentage, it's like the numbers are through the roof. When they're imprisonment, in jobs, opportunity, they get the short end of the stick. Okay, but when it can actually benefit, like, hey, Miss Lewis, this is calling from the city of Tampa. We're going to have a meeting or a discussion with the Citizen Review Board to discuss the tweaking of a policy that is we're going to go backwards with transparency and the purpose that this was even created. And we bought these things.
Yeah.
She didn't get the benefit of them calling her as the president of the NAACP for her to have a say, and her organization and its members to have a say about that. John, is there a problem that I think I asked before? Do you not see a problem with that, John?
No, it's definitely a problem. There's no reason. There's no reason to have that mute button at all. And the police department already has in place procedures to protect any confidential or privileged information from being released. There's none whatsoever.
Haiti Oropesa, I am here. This is a virtual town square for the community for us to discuss these important issues. For those of you who have been joining, thank you. Share this. It's very important information. Thank you, Justin. Great work. Do you want to say anything before we wrap up, Justin? Add anything else?
Just that it's something to keep an eye on. A lot of the times these things kind of pass under the radar, and I was glad I was able to catch it and put it out there to make the public aware. And it's not even one of those things where it's like, oh, I want to have an I told you so moment. It's just more like it's troubling that TPD didn't look around the country and say, hey, this has been a problem around the country, and maybe we should be careful with this. Maybe we should not just make it like try to pass it off as a small change to the community or citizens review board, and maybe we should take this a little more seriously, because odds are this is going to end up in a bad situation, unfortunately. And now at least the public knows, and they can keep an eye out for this. And us as a media, what we have to keep an eye out for is when we make these public records requests. I already have issues with getting public records from TPD. I've had to have the Florida Center for Government Accountability come in and kind of lean on TPD and the city to release public records to me that they slow roll and take a while to get to me. So now it's one of those things where anytime we get body cam video, we're going to have to be extra vigilant and just kind of make sure that there's nothing that's being cut out or missing because of these new functions.
Okay, well, Yvette, I'm going to let you say anything that you'd like to say before we wrap up. And please, for those in the city of Tampa, Adam Smith, Jane Castor, Mary O'Connor, you're invited. I'd love to be able to schedule a broadcast, a live one, and you can have an opportunity to come in to speak to these issues. Please keep the president of the NAACP in the loop when these decisions are being made. Yvette, do you want to say anything, any parting words before we wrap up here?
Yeah. So one of the things is that the mayor always compares us to other cities. So when we make suggestions and we make recommendations, her first thing is, oh, well, they're not doing that in other cities. So I find it a little troublesome that now you don't want to compare to other cities. So you don't want that comparison. And then, like I say, you just had a press conference on transparency, but yet you're not practicing what you preach. So my thing is, the city of Tampa, what do you really want, for us to do? Just sit here and be quiet and not say anything, and you continue to treat us this way and not to say anything. You know, it really, Chief O'Connor, um, hey, you have my number. Please pick up the phone and give me a call. Because a change needs to come with this policy right here. I definitely do not understand this. There's no transparency with this.
John, you want to say anything else before I say good night to everyone?
No, I enjoyed being with your panelists. You're both very informative, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so Heidi Oropesa with Florida Review Judge. Thank you, Yvette Lewis. Justin Garcia, my incredible colleague, John McGuire. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, everyone, have a great evening.
Thank you.
All right, see ya. Thank you.